I remember coming home one night after having been away from meaningful communication with our young children for 2 or 3 days. I was feeling somewhat guilty about this lack of communication, and when I feel guilty, I tend to become a bit indulgent. Because I was often away, Sandra had to compensate for my indulgence by coming on a bit too strong. Her toughness caused me to become a little softer. My increased softness caused her to become a little harder. Thus, the discipline system in our home was sometimes driven more by politics than by the consistent application of principles that create a beautiful family culture. When I came home that night, I went to the top of the stairs and yelled, "Boys, are you there? How's it going?" One of the younger boys ran down the hall, looked up at me, and then shouted back to his brother, "Hey, Sean, he's nice!" In other words, he's in a good mood. What I didn't know was that these boys were in bed under threat of their lives. They had used every conceivable excuse to get up and keep playing and goofing off. That had gone on until my wife's patience had come to an end. She had sent them to bed with a final command, "Now you boys stay in bed, or else." So when they saw Dad's car lights shine through the window, a new ray of hope was born. They thought, "Let's see what kind of mood Dad is in. If he's in a good mood, we can get up and play some more." When I came into the house, they were waiting. The words, "Hey, Sean, he's nice," were their cue. We started wrestling around in the front room and having all kinds of fun. Then out came Mom. With a mixture of frustration and anger in her voice, she shouted, "Are those kids still up?" I quickly replied, "Hey, I haven't seen much of them lately. I want to play with them for a little while." Needless to say, she didn't like my response, nor did I like hers. And there were the boys, watching Mom and Dad arguing right in front of them. The problem was that we had not synergized on this issue and come up with agreements we were both willing to live with. I was too much a product of my moods and feelings, and I wasn't consistent. I didn't show respect for the fact that these boys were in bed and should have stayed in bed. But I also hadn't seen them for some time. And a pertinent question was, how important is the bedtime rule anyway? The solution to this problem was not worked out immediately, but eventually we concluded that the bedtime rule wasn't that important for our family, particularly as the children became teenagers. We felt that what were normal bedtimes for many families were important and fun family times for us. The kids would sit around and talk, eat, and laugh, particularly with Sandra, since I typically went to bed earlier. The thing that enabled that synergistic solution for our family was acknowledging the differences and allowing all of us to do what we individually and collectively felt strongly about. Sometimes living with differences and appreciating other people's uniqueness is hard. We tend to want to mold people in our own image. When we get our security from our opinions, to hear a different opinion, particularly from someone as close as our spouse or children, threatens that security. We want them to agree with us, to think the way we think, to go along with our ideas. But as someone once said, when everybody thinks alike, nobody thinks very much. Another said, when two agree, one is unnecessary. Without difference, there's no basis for synergy, no option to create new solutions and opportunities. The key is to learn to blend the best of them together in a way that creates something entirely new. You can't have a delicious stew without diversity. You can't have a fruit salad without diversity. It's the diversity that creates the interest, the flavor, the new combination that puts together the best of all different things. Over the years, Sandra and I have come to recognize that one of the very best things about our marriage is our differences. We share an overarching commitment and value system and destination. But within that, we have great diversity, and we love it. Most of the time, that is. We count on each other's different perspectives to increase our judgment, to help us make better decisions. We count on each other's strengths to help compensate for our individual weaknesses. We count on each other's uniqueness to give spice and flavor to our relationship. We know we're better together than we are alone, and we know that one of the primary reasons is that we are different. Cynthia, daughter. If you wanted advice about something, you'd go to Dad and he'd give it to you. He'd say, "I'd do this," and he'd outline everything. But sometimes you didn't want advice, you just wanted someone to say, "You're the best, you're the greatest. They should have chosen you as cheerleader or class president or whatever instead of that other girl." You just wanted someone to be really supportive and loyal to you no matter what. And that was Mom. In fact, she was so loyal, I was always afraid she was going to call whoever I was mad at and bawl him out and say, "Why are you being so rude to my daughter? Why don't you ask her out?" Or "Why didn't you choose her to be the lead in the play?" She thought we were the greatest. It wasn't so much that we thought we were better than other kids, but she thought a lot of us. And we could feel that even though we knew she was prejudiced about us and usually exaggerated what we did. But it felt good to know that someone believed in you that much. And that's what she instilled in us. You can do anything. You will rise and accomplish your goals if you just stick with it. I believe in you and you can do it. Somehow, each of them taught us the best of what they were. Synergy is not just teamwork or cooperation. Synergy is creative teamwork, creative cooperation. Something new is created that was not there before and could not have been created without celebrating differences. Through deep empathic listening and courageous expressing and producing new insights, the third alternative is born. Now you can apply habits 4, 5, and 6 to create new third alternative solutions in any family situation. In fact, I'd like to suggest that you try to do just that. I'm going to share with you a real-life situation and ask you to engage your 4 human gifts to see how you would resolve it. I'll interrupt this experience at points along the way and ask questions so that you can use your pause button and think through specifically how you could use your gifts and just what you would do. I suggest you take the time to think deeply about and answer each question before you continue reading. My husband didn't earn much money, but we were finally able to buy a small house. We were thrilled to have a home of our own, even though the payments were such that we would just barely be able to stay financially solvent. After living in the home for a month, we became convinced that our front room looked shabby because of the threadbare couch that my husband's mother had given us. We decided that although we couldn't afford it, we had to have a new couch. We drove to a nearby furniture store and looked at the couches. We saw a beautiful early American couch that was just what we wanted, but we were astonished at the high price. Even the least expensive couch was twice the price we had thought it would be. The salesman asked us about our house. We told him, with some degree of pride, how much we loved it. Then he said, "How would that early American couch look in your front room?" We told him it would look grand. He suggested that it be delivered the following Wednesday. When we asked him how we could get it without any money, he assured us that would be no problem because they could defer the payments for 2 months. My husband said, "Okay, we'll take it." I told the salesman that we needed more time to think. My husband replied, "What is there to think about? We need it now and we can pay for it later." But I told the salesman that we would look around and then maybe come back. I could tell my husband was upset as I took hold of his hand and began to walk away. We walked to a little park and sat on a bench. He was still upset and hadn't said a word since we left the store. I decided to let him tell me how he felt and to listen so that I could understand his feeling and thinking. Finally, he told me that he felt embarrassed any time anyone came to our home and saw that old couch. He told me that he worked hard and couldn't see why we made so little money. He didn't think it was fair that his brother and others got paid so much more than he did. He said that sometimes he felt he was a failure. A new couch would be a sign that he was okay. His words sank into my heart. He almost convinced me that we should go back and get the couch. But then I asked him if he would listen while I told him my feelings. He said that he would. I told him how proud I was of him, and that to me he was the world's greatest success. I told him how I could barely sleep at night sometimes because I was worried that we didn't have enough money to pay the bills. I told him that if we bought that couch, in 2 months we'd have to pay for it and we wouldn't be able to do it. He said that he knew that what I was saying was true, but he still felt bad that he could not live as well as all those around him. Somehow we got to talking about how we could make our front room more attractive without spending a lot of money. I mentioned that the local thrift store might have a couch that we could afford. He laughed and said, "They could have an early American couch there that's far more early American than the one we've just seen." I reached out and took his hand, and we sat there for a long moment, just looking into each other's eyes. Finally, we decided to go over to the thrift store. We found a couch there that was mostly wood. The cushions were all detachable. They were terribly worn, but I didn't think it would be too much trouble to recover them in some fabric that would match the colors of the room. We bought the couch for $13.50 and headed home. The next week, I enrolled in a furniture upholstery class. My husband refinished the wooden parts. 3 weeks later, we had a lovely early American couch. As time went by, we'd sit on those golden cushions and hold hands and smile. That couch was the symbol of our financial recovery. What kind of solutions did you come up with as you went through this experience? As you connected with your own gifts, you may even have come up with answers that would work for you better than the one this couple discovered. Whatever solution you came up with, think about the difference it would make in your life. Think about the difference this couple's synergy made in their lives. Can you see how they used their 4 gifts, how they created the pause that enabled them to act instead of react? Can you see how they engaged in the enabled them to act instead of react? Can you see how they engaged in the enabled them to act instead of react? Can you see how they engaged in the habits 4, 5, and 6 process to come to a synergistic third alternative solution? Can you see the value that was added to their lives as they developed their talents and created something beautiful together? Can you imagine the difference it will make each time they look at their couch and see something they bought with cash and worked together to beautify, rather than something they bought on credit and are paying interest on every month? One wife described living these habits in these words: "With habits 4, 5, and 6, my husband and I are constantly seeking each other's exploration. It's like a ballet or dance of 2 dolphins, a very natural moving together. It has to do with mutual respect and trust, and the way these habits play out in day-to-day decisions, whether it's huge decisions, like whose house we lived in after we were married, or what we should have for dinner. These habits themselves have become a habit between us. This kind of synergy is the ultimate expression of a beautiful family culture, one that's creative and fun, one that has deep respect for every person and every person's varied interests and approaches. Synergy unleashes tremendous capacity. It brings birth to new ideas. It brings you together in new multi-dimensional ways, making huge deposits in the emotional bank account, because creating something new with someone else is enormously bonding. It also helps you create a culture in which you can successfully deal with any family challenge you might face. In fact, you could compare the culture created by habits 4, 5, and 6 to a healthy immune system in the body. It determines the family's ability to handle whatever challenges are thrown at it. It protects family members so that when mistakes are made, or when you get blindsided by some totally unexpected physical, financial, or social challenge, the family doesn't get overcome by it. The family has the capacity to accommodate it and rise above it, to adapt, to deal with whatever life throws at it and use it, learn from it, run with it, optimize it, and make the family stronger. With this kind of immune system, you actually see problems differently. A problem becomes something of a vaccination. It triggers the immune system to produce antibodies so that you never get the full-blown disease. So you can take any problem in your family life, a problem in your marriage, a struggle with one of your teenage children, a layoff, an estranged relationship with an older brother or sister, and look at it as a potential vaccination. Undoubtedly, it will cause some pain and perhaps a little scarring, but it can also trigger an immune response, the development of the capacity to fight. Then, no matter what difficulties come along, the immune system can wrap its arms around that difficulty, that setback, that disappointment, that deep fatigue, or whatever it may be that threatens family health, and turn it into a growth experience that makes the family more creative, more synergistic, more capable of solving problems, and of dealing with any kind of challenge you may confront. So problems don't discourage you, they encourage you to develop new levels of effectiveness and immunity. Seeing problems as vaccinations gives new perspective to the way you see even the challenge of dealing with your most difficult child. It will build strength in you and in the entire culture as well. In fact, the key to your family culture is how you treat the child that tests you the most. When you can show unconditional love to your most difficult child, others know that your love for them is also unconditional, and that knowledge builds trust. So strive to be grateful for the most difficult child, knowing that the very challenge can build strength in you and in the culture as well. When we come to understand the family immune system, we come to look upon small problems as re-inoculations of the family body. They cause the immune system to kick in, and by properly communicating and synergizing around them, the family builds greater immunity so that other small problems are not blown out of proportion. The reason AIDS is such a horrific disease is that it destroys the immune system. People don't die of AIDS, they die of the other diseases that take over because they have a compromised immune system. Families do not die from a particular setback. They die because they have a compromised immune system. They have overdrawn emotional bank accounts and no organizing processes to institutionalize or build into the day-to-day processes and patterns of family life the principles or the natural laws on which family is based. A healthy immune system fortifies you against 4 cancers that are deadly to family life: criticizing, complaining, comparing, and competing. These cancers are the opposite of a beautiful family culture, and without a healthy family immune system, they can metastasize and spread their negative consuming energy throughout the family. Another way to look at this, habits 4, 5, and 6 culture, is through the airplane metaphor. We said at the outset that we're going to be off track 90% of the time, but we can read the feedback and get back on course. Family is about learning the lessons of life, and feedback is a natural part of that learning. Problems and challenges give you feedback. Once you realize that each problem is asking for a response instead of just triggering a reaction, you start to learn. You become a learning family. You welcome challenges that test your capacity to synergize and to respond with higher levels of character and competence. You have differences and you say, "You see it differently. Good. Help me understand." You also draw upon the collective conscience, the moral or ethical nature of everyone in the family. But in order to do this, you have to get beyond the blaming and accusing. You have to get beyond the criticizing, complaining, comparing, and competing. You have to think win-win, seek to understand and be understood, and synergize. If you don't, at best, you'll end up satisfying, not optimizing, cooperating, not creating, compromising, not synergizing, and at worst, fighting or flighting. You also have to live habit 1. This is the leadership work. This is creating the unity that makes diversity meaningful. You have to have a destination because destination defines feedback. Some say that feedback is the breakfast of champions, but it isn't. Vision is the breakfast. Feedback is the lunch. Self-correction is the dinner. When you have your destination in mind, then you know what feedback means because it lets you know whether you're headed towards your destination or you're off track. And even when you have to go to other places because of the weather, you can keep coming back so that eventually you will reach it. You also need to live habit 3. One-on-one bonding times give you the emotional bank account to interact authentically and in synergistic ways with the members of your family. And weekly family times provide the forum for synergistic interaction. You can see how interwoven these habits are, how they come together and reinforce one another to create this beautiful family culture we've been talking about. Another way of expressing habits 4, 5, and 6 can be found in one simple idea. Involve people in the problem and work out the solution together. We had an interesting experience with this in our own family some years ago. Sandra and I had read a great deal about the impact of television on the minds of children, and we had begun to feel that in many ways it was like an open sewage pipe right into our home. We had set up rules and guidelines to limit the amount of TV watching, but it seemed that there were always exceptions. The rules kept changing, we were constantly in the position of dispensing privileges and judgments, and we had grown weary of negotiating with the children. It had become a power struggle that occasionally caused feelings to flare in negative ways. Although we agreed on the problem, we didn't agree on the solution. I wanted to take an authoritarian approach, inspired by an article I'd read about a man who actually threw the family TV set into the garbage. In some ways, that kind of dramatic action seemed to demonstrate the message we wanted to send. But Sandra favored a more principle-based approach. She didn't want the children to resent the decision, to feel it was not a win for them. As we synergized together, we realized we were trying to decide how we could solve this problem for the children when what we needed to do was help them solve it for themselves. We decided to engage habits 4, 5, and 6 on a family-wide basis. At our next family night, we introduced the subject, TV, how much is enough? Everyone's interest was immediately focused because this was an important matter for all involved. One son said, "What's so bad about watching TV? There's a lot of good stuff on. I still get my homework done. I can actually study while the TV is on. My grades are good and so are everyone else's. So what's the problem?" A daughter added, "If you're afraid we're going to be corrupted by TV, you're wrong. We don't usually watch bad shows, and if one is bad, we usually turn to another station. Besides, what's shocking to you is not all that shocking to us." Another said, "If we don't watch certain shows, we're socially out of it. All the kids watch these shows. We even talk about them every day at school. These shows help us see how things really are in the world, so that we don't get caught up in all the dumb things that are going on." We didn't interrupt the kids. They all had something to say about why they didn't think we should make any drastic changes in our TV habits. As we listened to their concerns, we could see how deeply they were into their feelings about TV. Finally, when their energy seemed spent, we said, "Now let us see if we really understand what you've just said." And we proceeded to restate all we had heard and felt them say. Then we asked, "Do you feel that we truly understand your point of view?" They agreed that we did. "Now we would like you to understand where we're coming from." The response was not very favorable. "You just want to tell us all the negative things people are saying about watching TV. You want to pull the plug and take away our only escape from all the pressure we feel at school." We listened empathically and then assured them that this was not our intent at all. In fact, we said, when we've gone over these articles together, we're going to leave the room and let you kids decide what you feel we should do about watching TV. "You're kidding!" they exclaimed. "What if our decision is different from what you want?" "We'll honor your decision," we said. "All we ask is that you be in total agreement about what you recommend that we do." We could see by the expressions on their faces that they liked the idea. So, altogether, we went over the information in the 2 articles we had brought to the meeting. The children sensed this material would be important in their upcoming decision, so they listened very attentively. We began by reading some shocking facts. One article said that the average television diet for a person between the ages of 1 and 18 is 6 hours a day. If there is cable in the home, that increases to 8 hours per day. By the time young Americans have graduated from school, they will have spent 13,000 hours in school and 16,000 hours in front of a television set. During that time, they will have witnessed 24,000 killings. 1. We told the children that as parents, those facts were scary to us, and that when we watched as much TV as we did, it became by far the most powerful socializing force in our lives, more than education, more than time spent with the family. We pointed out the discrepancy concerning TV program directors who claimed there is no scientific evidence to link TV viewing to behavior, and then quote evidence showing the powerful impact a 20-second commercial has on behavior. Then we said, just think about how different you feel when you watch a television show and when you watch a commercial. When a 30 to 60-second commercial comes on, you know it's an advertisement. You don't believe a lot of what you see and hear. Your defenses are up because it's advertising. It's just hype, and we've all been burned by it again and again. But when you're watching a show, your defenses are down. You become emotionally invested, vulnerable. You're letting images come into your head, and you're not even thinking about it. You're just absorbing it. Of course, the commercials impact us in spite of our defensiveness. Can you imagine the impact the regular programs are having on us when we're in a much more receptive posture? We continued these discussions as we read more. One author pointed out what happens when television becomes the babysitter for parents who are not cautious about what their children watch. He said that unsupervised TV watching is like inviting a stranger into your home for 2 or 3 hours every day to tell the children all about a perverse world where violence solves problems, and all anyone needs to be happy is the right beer, a fast car, good looks, and lots of sex. Of course, the parents are not there while all this is happening because they trust this television character to keep the children as quiet, interested, and entertained as possible. This teacher could do a lot of damage during that long daily visit, planting misperceptions no one could ever change and causing problems no one could solve. One U.S. government study linked watching television with being obese, hostile, and depressed. In this study, the researchers found that those who watched TV 4 or more hours a day were more than twice as likely to smoke cigarettes and be physically inactive as those who viewed the tube 1 hour or less a day. 2. After discussing the negative impact of watching too much television, we turned to some of the positive things that might happen if we changed our habit. In one of the articles, a study was quoted which showed that families who cut back on TV watching found more time for conversation at home. One person said, "Before, it was like mostly we'd see Dad before he left for work. When he came home, he'd watch TV with us, and then it was like, 'Good night, Dad.' Now we talk all the time. We're really close." Another author pointed out that research data indicate that families that limit television viewing to a maximum of 2 hours a day of carefully selected programs may see the following significant changes in family relationships. Value setting will be taught and reinforced by the family. Families will learn how to establish values and how to reason together. Relationships between parents and youth will improve in families. Homework will be completed with less time pressure. Personal conversations will increase substantially. Children's imaginations will come back to life. Each family member will become a discriminating selector and evaluator of programs. Parents can become family leaders again. Good reading habits may be substituted for television viewing. 4. After we shared this information, we got up and left the room. About an hour later, we were invited to return for the verdict. One of our daughters later gave us the full report of what happened in that vitally important hour. She said that after we had left the room, her brothers and sisters quickly appointed her the discussion leader. They knew she was an advocate of watching TV, and they anticipated a quick resolution. At first, the meeting was chaotic. They all wanted to speak up and get their views known in a hurry so they'd be able to get a liberal decision, perhaps to cut down just a little on the amount of TV they were watching. In order to satisfy us as parents, someone suggested that they all promise to do their household chores cheerfully and get their homework done without being reminded. But then our oldest son spoke up. Everyone turned to listen as he told how the articles had impressed him. He said TV had put some ideas into his mind that were not what he wanted to be there, and he felt he would be better off if he watched a lot less TV. He also said he felt the younger children in the family were starting to see things far worse than what he had seen as a young boy. Then one of the younger children spoke up. He told everyone about a show he had seen that made him feel scared when he went to bed. At that point, the spirit of the meeting became very serious. As the children continued to discuss the issue, a new feeling gradually began to emerge. They started to think differently. One said, "I think we're watching too much TV, but I don't want to give it up altogether. There are some shows I feel good about and I really want to watch." Then others talked about shows they enjoyed and wanted to continue to watch. Another said, "I don't think we should talk about how much time to watch each day, because some days I don't want to watch at all, but on other days I want to watch more." So they decided to determine how many hours each week rather than each day would be appropriate. Some thought 20 hours would not be too much. Some thought 5 hours would be better. Finally, they all agreed that 7 hours a week was about right, and they appointed this daughter the monitor to ensure that the decision was carried out. This decision proved to be a turning point in our family life. We began to interact more, to read more. We eventually reached the point where television was not an issue, and today, aside from news and an occasional movie or sports event, we hardly ever have it on. By involving our children in the problem, we made them participators with us in finding a solution. And because the solution was their decision, they were invested in its success. We didn't have to worry about supervising and keeping them on track. Also, by sharing information about the consequences of excessive television watching, we were able to move beyond our way or their way. We were able to get into the principles involved in the issue and tap into the collective conscience of everyone involved. We were able to help them realize that a commitment to win-win is more than a commitment to having everyone temporarily pleased with the outcome. It's a commitment to principles, because a solution that is not based on principles is never a win for anyone in the long run. If you'd like to see how these habits 4, 5, and 6 process can work in your own family, you might try the following experiment. Take some issue that needs to be resolved, an issue where people have different opinions and different points of view. Try working together to answer the following 4 questions. What is the problem from everyone's point of view? Really listen to each other with the intent to understand, not to reply. Work at it until other people can express each person's point of view to that person's satisfaction. Focus on interests, not positions. 2. What are the key issues involved? Once the viewpoints are expressed and everyone feels thoroughly understood, then look at the problem together and identify the issues that need to be resolved. 3. What would constitute a fully acceptable solution? Determine the net results that would be a win for each person.